The first thing I learned about being a long-lost daughter was that everyone wanted a clean story. The family wanted a miracle reunion that made their brand look tender. The tabloids wanted a villain, preferably with lipstick smeared, and motives simple. The man who came to my rented studio with a bouquet wanted a shortcut. I wanted none of it. I wanted rent money, a quiet fridge that didn't buzz, and enough dignity to sleep without rehearsing replies. My name is Rowan Hale, not the one on the glossy family tree, not the one on the old school records either. It's the name I chose when the clinic receptionist asked what to write on the intake form, and I realized I could pick a word that meant I could bend without breaking. The DNA test didn't feel like destiny. It felt like paperwork. A nurse swabbed my cheek, labeled the tube, and apologized for the wait time. 2 weeks later, a lawyer called, voice smooth as polished glass, and told me a wealthy couple had been searching for me for years. In the same breath, he asked if I could be discreet, as if my body itself were a leak that needed sealing. I said I would think about it, and hung up, then counted the coins in my jar and decided discretion was a luxury I couldn't afford. I agreed to meet them, but not in their mansion. I chose a cafe with sticky tables and loud grinders, because power hates background noise. It makes secrets harder to stage. Before the reunion, I had been living a life that was small on purpose. Small lives are easier to protect. I fixed delivery bikes for neighbors, built cheap shelving for a noodle shop, and filmed product reviews to earn tips from strangers who liked my blunt tone. My followers weren't huge, but they were loyal in a scrappy way. The way people are loyal to someone who tells the truth about a cheap kettle or a scammy landlord. My favorite streams were the ones where I taught viewers how to read a contract clause without being ashamed of needing help. I had learned those lessons the hard way, in apartments where the deposit vanished, because the owner knew I couldn't fight, and in jobs where bosses smiled while stealing minutes from my paycheck. I didn't see myself as a hero. I saw myself as someone who refused to be an easy target twice. At the cafe, my supposed mother cried before she said hello. My supposed father shook my hand like he was signing a deal. Across from them sat a young woman my age, perfectly dressed, posture perfect, eyes guarded. They introduced her as their daughter, as if words could hold two truths at once without splintering. Her name was Lark. She didn't look at me with hatred. She looked at me like a new variable in an equation that had kept her alive. I understood her immediately. When you're raised in a house built of expectations, you learn to measure doors by the noise they make when they close. I would have walked away if not for the second strange thing I learned that week. Words began appearing in my vision, faint at first, then bright, then relentless. They weren't my thoughts. They stacked in neat lines like a comment feed, the kind you see during live streams. The first time, while my father was explaining inheritance planning, a line flickered above his cufflink. Watch him offer you the smallest slice and call it generous. Another line appeared near Lark's glass of water. She isn't your enemy. She's the lock they built. I blinked hard. The words stayed. My mother dabbed her eyes. My father kept talking. Lark held her spoon as if it were the only stable thing in the room. I left the cafe with their business card in my pocket and an invisible audience in my face. Back at my studio, I tested the phenomenon like a person who refuses to believe in magic until it survives bad lighting. I turned off the lamps. The line stayed. I stared at a blank wall. A new line appeared anyway. You'll try to ignore us. Don't. I laughed out loud, partly because it was absurd, and partly because it sounded like something a bored internet would say. My phone buzzed with an unknown number. A message arrived. This is Evan Klein. I'd love to see you. I think we have something special. Under the message, another line popped up, bright with sarcasm. Here comes the sincere prince. Charge him for your time. Evan showed up the next afternoon in a suit that looked allergic to humidity. He carried flowers, smiled softly, and spoke as if he had practiced in front of a mirror until kindness became an accent he could switch on. He told me he had heard about me through family circles. He told me my story moved him. He told me that after meeting me, he finally understood who he truly liked. Then he leaned closer and delivered the sentence like it was a gift. If you like me too, could you ask your parents to change my arranged match to you? The comment lines exploded, one after another, overlapping in the air like fireworks. He said the quiet part out loud. He wants you to beg. He wants you to take the blame. Do it on camera. I didn't slap him. I didn't cry. I didn't perform shock for his satisfaction. I picked up my phone, opened a live stream, and tilted the camera so his face filled the frame. Say that again for everyone, I said, sweetly. the way baristas ask if you want your change. Evan's smile wavered. Rowan. No, I corrected, still sweet. My audience didn't hear you. In my chat box, real comments started flowing as people joined friends of friends, curious strangers, bored commuters. The invisible lines in my vision seemed to synchronize with the actual chat, like two radio stations finding the same frequency. Evan tried to laugh it off, tried to pivot into jokes about romance and destiny. I let him talk, because nothing is more profitable than a man showing how entitled he is when he believes no one is recording. When the clip spread, my biological parents called me in a panic. Their assistant's voice was strained with polite alarm. We'd appreciate it if you didn't create controversy, she said, as if controversy were a stain on furniture. The comment lines offered a simple translation. They care more about the family stock price than your safety. I asked to speak to Lark instead. There was a pause too long, too calculated. Then Lark came on the line. Her voice was calm, a calm that felt trained. You embarrassed Evan, she said. I waited for the insult, the jealousy, the threat. Instead, she added, quietly, thank you. He's been circling me like a contract for months. We met in the same cafe, but this time we sat in the corner where the wall had a crack shaped like a lightning bolt. Lark arrived without her parents. She wore a plain jacket and looked almost relieved to be ordinary for an hour. I told her I wasn't there to steal her life. She gave a short, humorless laugh. My life isn't a dress you can take, she said. It's a job. I've been doing it since I learned to read. Then she surprised me by asking about my studio rent, my freelance work, my bruised knuckles from fixing delivery bikes for neighbors. She listened like someone hungry for facts. The invisible lines drifted above her shoulder. She's good at survival. So are you. Team up. That was the first time Lark told me the truth about her perfect upbringing. Every friend she had was vetted. Every teacher wrote reports. Every birthday party ended with a debrief where her parents asked which families had shown respect and which hadn't. She learned to smile on command and to swallow anger like it was medicine. When she turned 17, her father put a binder in front of her labeled Strategic Alliances. Inside were profiles of young men like Evan. School records, family assets, scandal risk, projected compatibility, and a blank space for her signature. She signed then because she thought refusal would break her mother's heart. Later, she realized the binder wasn't about love or even status. It was about keeping money inside the right loop, like a snake biting its own tail and calling it tradition. My version of tradition had been different. A foster aunt who taught me how to hide cash in a shampoo bottle. A supervisor who paid me in envelopes and reminded me not to trust promises. A landlord who smiled while pushing rent up because he thought I'd accept any price to avoid conflict. Those lessons made me hard in public, soft only in private with people who had earned it. Lark's lessons made her soft in public and hard in private, where no one could accuse her of being ungrateful. Sitting across from each other, we realized we had been trained in opposite directions to serve the same machine. The deal we made was simple and, to our parents, unthinkable. We would cooperate, not in a performative sisterhood for the cameras, but in a practical way that produced leverage. Lark had access to rooms and documents. I had a platform and a willingness to be disliked. We would build something together that our parents couldn't control, something that made money and also made noise. Lark said she knew exactly where the family hid its shame. In a charity foundation used as a laundering funnel, in supplier contracts with fake bids, in donations that returned as consulting fees. I said I knew how to turn shame into receipts. The invisible lines pulsed. Yes, receipts. Always receipts. Our first shared project wasn't a takedown. It was a marketplace. Lark had watched her mother buy luxury skincare that was just generic cream in an expensive jar. I had watched my neighbors buy counterfeit electronics that sparked and then blame themselves for being cheap. We created a weekly segment called Proof of Purchase. We tested products live, showed manufacturing codes, taught viewers to spot fake labels, and highlighted small businesses that treated customers like humans rather than targets. The segment made money through affiliate fees we disclosed loudly. Transparency became our brand, partly because it was ethical and partly because it was armor. You can't blackmail someone with a secret they've already published. We learned quickly that ethics doesn't mean safety. A man in a black scooter helmet began appearing outside our office after streams, always parked in the same spot, always pretending to check his phone. One night he followed me 3 blocks. The comment lines flickered with blunt urgency. Do not go home alone. I ducked into a crowded convenience store, called Lark, and waited until a security guard walked me back to the office. Lark arrived breathless, furious, and for the first time her carefully trained calm cracked. "They think fear will make you smaller," she said. I answered, "Fear makes me louder." We installed cameras, hired a retired bouncer recommended by a vendor, and added a rule: no one walks alone after dark. The invisible comment lines weren't always helpful, but they were useful in one specific way. They reacted before reality did, like a nervous system for the room. When a sponsor offered a large check with no contract, a line appeared. "Untracked money is a hook." When a fan sent a sob story asking for help, another line appeared. "Verify before you fund." When Lark's hands shook during her first on-camera appearance, a gentler line drifted through. "You're allowed to be new at this." I hated how much that last one mattered. I also hated that the lines were teaching me to accept support without surrendering control. Our parents tried to cut the marketplace off by pressuring brands not to work with us. They sent polite emails about misalignment and called it responsible stewardship. The effect was immediate. Some companies disappeared from our inbox. We adapted. We partnered with cooperatives, with small factories, with a union-run delivery service that needed visibility more than approval. Lark negotiated rates like she was bargaining for her own breathing, and I edited videos until my eyes burned. For the first time, her skills weren't being used to decorate a gala. They were being used to build a runway we could both stand on. That runway mattered when the first serious smear hit. A gossip account posted an old photo of me in a police station lobby from years ago, implying I had been arrested for theft. The truth was boring. I had reported my landlord for assault, and the police had made me wait for hours while he joked with them. Boring truths rarely go viral. The comment lines flashed. "They'll turn your survival into a crime." I posted the incident report number, the officer's name, the timestamps, and a clip of the landlord's voicemail threatening me. Then I went live and taught viewers how to request public records. The gossip account deleted the post. Another one copied it. We repeated the receipts. Repetition, I learned, can be a weapon in good hands. Lark's family hit her from a different angle. Guilt dressed as concern. Her mother invited her to tea and spoke about the pain you're causing your father. Her aunt sent voice notes about family loyalty, with soft music playing behind the words, like emotional wallpaper. A childhood friend called to ask if she was okay, voice gentle and suspicious, as if sanity required obedience. Lark listened to each call and kept her face still. Afterward, she came to our office and sat on the floor with her knees pulled up, finally letting her body show what her voice refused. I sat beside her without touching, just present. A line hovered above us, unusually plain. "Do not ask her to forgive them to make yourself comfortable." So I didn't. I said, "You can miss them and still refuse them." When we were ready to challenge the foundation, we didn't begin with rage. We began with math, because math is harder to gaslight. Lark recovered monthly reports from the board portal, donation totals, expense categories, vendor lists. I compared them against public filings, then against invoice copies from vendors I found through the warehouse district. The numbers didn't match in ways that looked like accidents. A youth education grant paid a consulting firm that employed my father's golfing buddy. A disaster relief fund bought catering services from a company owned by Evan's cousin. In my vision, the comment lines began repeating a mantra like a drum. Follow the money. The more we followed, the more we found a person behind the pattern. The foundation director, a woman named Maris who spoke about empathy like it was a product feature. She was the kind of executive who wore soft colors to look harmless and used that harmlessness to move millions quietly. Lark said Maris had raised her. In a way, Maris chose Lark's tutors, managed her schedule, controlled her public image, and drafted her engagement timeline like a project plan. Lark's anger wasn't explosive, it was surgical. She didn't just lie, Lark said. She authored the lie. The lines in my vision answered, "The architect, not the messenger." Maris noticed our curiosity before we were ready. She invited Lark to lunch and offered her a private deal. Return to the mansion, publicly disavow my recklessness. And in exchange, Maris would restructure the foundation so Lark could lead with integrity. It was the most elegant bribe I'd ever seen, an offer to become the kind of manager who polishes the machine from the inside while still keeping it running. Lark told me about the lunch afterward, voice flat. "She thinks I want permission to do the right thing," Lark said. A line floated near Lark's mouth like an exhale. "Choose yourself, not their title." We needed a witness from inside Maris's circle, and we found one in an unlikely place. A tired accountant named Juno, who worked late nights at the subsidiary office because she couldn't afford to quit. I met her in a noodle shop after her shift, bought her dumplings, and told her I wasn't asking her to be brave for free. I offered her a job and a lawyer. Juno laughed like she didn't trust kindness. Then she opened her laptop and showed me spreadsheets with hidden columns and file names like clean version and public version. They keep the real numbers in the drafts, she said. They think no one will ever see the drafts. The comment line sparked, "She's your bridge." 2 days after Juno agreed to help, her office laptop vanished from her desk. Security footage showed a maintenance worker wheeling out a cart at 6 a.m. Juno wasn't fooled. Neither were we. The comment lines in my vision went cold. They're hunting the source. We responded like people who had never been protected by institutions. We copied files to encrypted drives. We mirrored documents to 3 jurisdictions. We printed critical pages and hid them in boring places inside a box labeled tax receipts, taped under a drawer, tucked into the spine of an outdated accounting textbook. Lark looked at the paper stash and said, half laughing, "We're building a bunker out of stationery." I said, "Paper doesn't get hacked. It only gets burned, and that's why you keep multiple stacks." With Juno's help, we prepared the release like a controlled demolition. We built a website that mirrored files across multiple servers, so takedown requests would be slow. We created short explainer videos for people who hated reading and longer documents for people who loved evidence. We wrote a hotline script for vendors who wanted to report unpaid invoices without being exposed. We rehearsed our language, so we wouldn't accidentally libel someone while telling the truth. Lark practiced saying her own name into a microphone until it stopped sounding borrowed. The comment lines were quiet during those rehearsals, as if even the invisible audience understood that some moments are sacred. We started with small wins, because small wins teach your nervous system that victory is possible. Lark leaked me the guest list for a private youth gala. I went as a staffer, hair tied back, wearing a cheap blazer and a lanyard printed with a fake QR code. I live-streamed the back corridors, the catering crew waiting for tips they'd never get, the security guards told to smile while their overtime went unpaid, the donor wives complaining about parking while the kitchen staff shared one broken fan. I never showed faces without consent. I didn't do it to humiliate workers. I did it to show the machinery. The comment lines kept me honest. Don't punch down. Aim up. At the gala, Evan approached me again, this time with anger disguised as flirtation. He warned me I was ruining my future. He said no respectable family would accept a daughter who broadcasted dirty laundry. I smiled and asked him which laundry he meant. The unpaid staff, the fake charity invoices, or his own proposal for me to beg for a marriage swap. The camera caught his jaw tightening. The chat erupted. A sponsor pulled out. A columnist quoted him incorrectly on purpose, making him sound worse than he already was. He stormed away. Behind him, Lark watched from the balcony, eyes bright in a way I hadn't seen before. She sent me a message. "He's afraid. Keep pushing." Our parents tried a different tactic, kindness as a leash. My mother invited me to the mansion for family dinner and promised it would be private. A warning line flashed. "Dinner is a set. They'll offer you a non-disclosure agreement with dessert." I went anyway, because sometimes you need to watch the trap to learn its shape. The mansion smelled like polished wood and controlled temperature. My father served wine with the seriousness of a ritual. He spoke about forgiveness, about starting over, about unity. Then the family lawyer slid a folder toward me. Inside was a contract with soft language and sharp teeth. A media guidelines agreement that would silence me in exchange for a small monthly stipend. I asked, calm, "If you missed me so much, why is the first thing you offer me a gag?" My mother's face twitched. My father's smile remained, but his eyes hardened. Lark, sitting 2 chairs away, dabbed her mouth as if she needed time to choose a side in public. The line above her simply said, "Now." Lark put her fork down and said, clearly, "If Rowan signs that, I'm canceling the gala sponsorships and making it public. Why?" The room went silent. My father's hand tightened around his glass. Lark held his gaze until he looked away first. After that dinner, our parents stopped pretending the problem was my behavior. They moved to containment. A PR team published an exclusive interview about my difficult childhood, painting me as unstable and impulsive, implying that the stress of being reunited had triggered me. The lines in my vision arrived before I even saw the article. "They'll try to diagnose you into silence." I responded with a timeline. Dates, documents, screenshots. I showed the contract they wanted me to sign. I showed Evan's messages. I showed the charity ledger Lark had photographed. I kept the captions spare. I didn't call anyone monsters. I let the evidence do it. The backlash was immediate and messy. Some people accused me of being ungrateful. Some called me brave. Most treated it like entertainment, which was both depressing and useful. Sponsors threatened to pull funding from my parents' foundation. My father's stock dipped. My mother's social circle froze. In that chaos, Evan attempted to rebrand himself as a victim, claiming he had been set up. A line floated in my vision like an exhausted sigh. He always says that. Lark and I scheduled our next move like engineers. We would go after the real engine behind the family's money, an offshore procurement scheme run through a subsidiary no one mentioned at dinner. Lark attended a board meeting, listened, and memorized. She texted me the names of 2 executives who signed everything and asked no questions. I visited the warehouse district at dawn, filmed loading docks, spoke to drivers who hadn't been paid, and bought coffee for a woman who tracked invoices on paper because the company lost her login each month. The comment lines reminded me, pay people for their info, don't ask for heroism. When I had enough, I built a story the way you build a bridge. Supports first, then weight-bearing facts. Then a surface people could walk across without falling into denial. The night we released it, our live stream hit numbers I had never seen. People watched because they love collapse, but they stayed because the evidence was strangely intimate. A forklift receipt. A falsified stamp. A driver's voice cracking when he said he missed his kid's birthday because he took double shifts for a paycheck that never came. Lark appeared on screen beside me for the first time. She didn't cry. She didn't apologize. She said, I was raised in this family. I benefited from the lies. I'm done benefiting. The chat spiraled into chaos and, buried inside, something like respect. The line that flashed in my vision felt almost affectionate. She chose the harder side. My father called at 2 a.m., furious. He demanded Lark return home. He called her selfish. He called me a parasite. I listened until he ran out of breath. Then I offered terms. He resigns from the foundation board, repays vendors, and stops using Lark as a shield. If not, I drop the next folder. Silence followed. A line hovered near my phone like a timer. He's calculating. Finally, he said, You don't understand what you're playing with. I replied, I understand exactly. That's why I'm playing loud. He retaliated in the way powerful men do when they can't win cleanly. He went after my home. My landlord suddenly needed the apartment back. My bank account was flagged for unusual activity. A police officer visited my studio about a noise complaint that didn't exist. The line in my vision was blunt. They'll try to make your life too inconvenient to continue. Lark moved fast. She arranged a new place for me under a company name that couldn't be traced easily. She transferred me money, not as charity, but as investment. You're not my charity case, she said. You're my partner. We moved our operation to a small office above a printing shop, the kind of place that smells like ink and stubbornness. We hired 2 assistants who didn't flinch at scandal. We paid them well, because we weren't building a revolution on underpaid labor. We launched a channel that combined consumer education with corporate exposure. How to read contracts, how to spot fake charities, how to document wage theft, how to keep your story when someone tries to buy it. It sounded unglamorous. It went viral anyway. People are hungry for tools when they're tired of being told their suffering is a personality problem. 2 days after the release, an envelope arrived by courier with a judge's seal on the front and a threat inside. Our parents had filed for an emergency injunction, claiming we were defaming the foundation and endangering ongoing philanthropic efforts. They wanted the website taken down within 24 hours, and they wanted my accounts frozen until facts were verified. The comment lines in my vision didn't bother with subtlety. They're trying to bleed you dry with procedure. Juno read the paperwork, tapped a paragraph, and said, They're counting on you being too tired to respond correctly. We weren't too tired. We were angry in a disciplined way. In court, the air smelled like old paper and stale coffee. My father sat behind his attorney and avoided looking at me, as if eye contact might admit we shared blood. Lark sat beside me in a plain blazer, hands folded, face calm, the kind of calm she used to perform for donors, except this time she was performing it for herself. Our lawyer presented the evidence bundle, and Juno testified with a voice that never rose but never wavered. The judge asked my father's attorney why a family dispute required silencing whistleblowing about unpaid vendors. The attorney stuttered, then pivoted to my online influence. I watched the judge's expression harden. The motion was denied. Outside the courtroom, reporters tried to shove microphones under Lark's chin. She said, "Ask my father why he thinks charity means secrecy," and walked away without running. We knew a denied motion wouldn't stop the machine. It would only teach it to be sneakier. That week, our video drafts began disappearing from cloud storage, one file at a time, as if an invisible hand were tidying up. Juno traced the access logs and found a login token tied to Maris's office network. Lark stared at the printout and said, very softly, "She's checking if we're bluffing." The comment lines flashed a practical suggestion. Go analog again. We bought an old camcorder from a pawn shop, recorded to tape, and stored the tapes in a safe deposit box under a name no one in the mansion would guess. It felt ridiculous and also satisfying, like returning to the basics when technology became a battlefield. Our channel grew stranger as it grew bigger. Some viewers treated us like saviors, and that kind of worship made my skin itch. Others demanded we destroy every rich person alive, which sounded dramatic, but solved nothing. Lark and I argued about tone on a Tuesday night that stretched into Wednesday morning. I said we should keep it narrow, factual, almost boring, because boring wins in court. Lark said boredom would lose the public, and without public pressure the courts would move like glaciers. We snapped at each other, then fell silent, ashamed. The comment lines hovered between us with an unexpected reminder. You're both right and both tired. We made a compromise. Short, sharp videos for the feed, and a separate archive for deep documentation, linked in every post like a quiet spine. On Friday, we held a vendor meeting in a community hall above a bakery. It wasn't glamorous. Folding chairs squeaked, a ceiling fan rattled. But the room was full. Drivers, caterers, office cleaners, a printing shop owner who had been paid an exposure, and a young courier who looked terrified to be seen. We explained the legal process, the risks, the protections we could afford, the protections we couldn't. We offered microgrants for anyone who lost work for speaking. Lark stood at the front and said, "I know you were asked to smile while being cheated. I'm asking you to stop smiling, if you can." People didn't clap like in movies. They nodded, slow and heavy, because trust is built in quieter motions. That same night, a warehouse tied to the procurement subsidiary caught fire. The official statement blamed an electrical fault. The drivers we knew told a different story. Blocked exits, expired extinguishers, pallets stacked against safety signage. I went live from across the street, filming the smoke curling into the dark. My voice stayed level, but my hands shook. The comment lines appeared in a long column, urgent and grim. This isn't an accident. It's a cost-cutting decision. By morning, Juno had pulled inspection records showing repeated violations that had been resolved on paper without being fixed. We published the records and the names of the inspectors who signed off. The city prosecutor opened an investigation. For the first time, the scandal stopped being about family drama and became what it always should have been, about harm. After the fire, my mother called me from a private number. She didn't yell. Her voice stayed dry. She asked, "Is it true people died?" The question made me nauseous, because it revealed how long she'd been allowed to live inside curated information. I said, "Yes." She went silent, then whispered, "Your father says you're doing this to punish us?" I answered, "No, I'm doing this because someone got punished who didn't deserve it." She asked if we could meet alone. The comment lines offered no opinion, only a warning. Don't let her turn you into her confessional. I agreed anyway, because I wanted to see if a woman could wake up from a lie while still inside it. We met in a public park at noon, sunlight harsh enough to make secrets uncomfortable. My mother arrived without jewelry, hands bare, as if she didn't know what to do with them. She looked at me for a long time and said, "They told me you were taken by chance. They told me there was nothing I could have done." I didn't know if she was lying now or then. I said, "What do you want from me?" She flinched, then said, "To believe I'm not a monster." I wanted to tell her belief isn't a gift you can demand. Instead, I said, "Start by stopping the next harm. Start by telling the truth where it costs you something." She nodded once, small and brittle, and left before we could pretend we'd fixed anything. Security escalated after the park meeting. The scooter helmet man returned, this time with a friend, and they tried to slip into our office behind a delivery. Our bouncer caught the door with his boot and shoved them out into the stairwell. One of them dropped a small device, something meant to skim data from a laptop port. Juno held it with a tissue like it was a bug. The comment lines offered a blunt conclusion. They're terrified of paperwork, and even more terrified of you two staying friends. Lark watched the stairwell camera feed and said, "They don't know how to fight people who aren't afraid of being called rude." The strangest moment came when the opinion engine glitched. During a stream, the invisible lines in my vision stopped pretending to be casual chat and displayed a phrase that looked like a command prompt. Adjust. Sentiment. Target Rowan. Induce shame. Offer redemption through silence. I stared so hard my eyes watered. Lark saw my face and asked what was wrong. I wrote the phrase on a whiteboard. Juno swore under her breath. We clipped the moment and posted it. Not as proof of supernatural prophecy, but as proof of how the family had been trying to engineer public reaction, like a marketing campaign. The clip went everywhere. People laughed, then stopped laughing, when they realized how many narratives in their own lives were being steered the same way. With the public now aware of the engine, our parents lost their favorite invisible weapon. Their next move had to be visible, which made it clumsier and easier to block. That's why Evan's final approach mattered. A marriage offer wasn't just romance propaganda. It was a reset button they could hold up for cameras. We prepared for it with an almost boring seriousness. We drafted a public ethics pledge for corporate donors. We gathered vendor signatures. We lined up journalists who cared more about labor than gossip. By the time the Winter Lantern Gala arrived, we weren't walking into a party. We were walking into a live audit with chandeliers. Before the gala, Lark asked to meet Maris one last time. Not as a daughter figure or a brand asset, but as a witness. They sat in Maris's office with the blinds half closed. Maris spoke about legacy and responsibility, then slid a folder across the desk, offering Lark full control of the foundation if she would publicly denounce me and frame the documents as misunderstandings. Lark didn't raise her voice. She asked Maris to repeat the offer slowly, then asked a follow-up question about the warehouse fire, and kept her phone screen down on the table, recording everything. When Maris admitted without using the word that safety budgets were reallocated to protect donor experiences, Lark's expression didn't change. She stood, thanked Maris for her time with the same politeness she used at galas, and walked out. 20 minutes later, the recording was in the prosecutor's inbox. That night, I went live and set new rules for my channel. "I'm not your friend," I told my viewers, and watched the chat freeze. "I'm not your daughter either. I'm a person doing work, and if you want to help like adults. Share verified links. Don't harass workers. Don't dox people. Don't threaten anyone on my behalf." Some viewers left, angry that I wouldn't feed them a villain to chew. Others stayed, quieter but steadier. The comment lines in my vision, for once, seemed to approve. Boundaries are what keep you human. The first restitution checks went out a week before the gala because Lark forced the timing by liquidating a portion of her trust and making the transfers public. We filmed the process with consent. A caterer opening an envelope and laughing like she'd forgotten she could. A driver staring at his phone screen because the number looked unreal. A janitor wiping her eyes and then scolding me for filming her face too close. It wasn't cinematic. It was ordinary. And that ordinariness felt like justice returning to a place it had been missing from. I realized then that the real opposite of the mansion wasn't poverty. It was fairness. The morning of the Winter Lantern Gala, I woke up to silence and felt my stomach drop, because I had gotten used to crisis as background noise. I made tea, watched the steam curl, and practiced one sentence over and over until it sounded like mine. This isn't a family story. It's a public one. When Lark arrived, she handed me a small pin shaped like a paperclip. "For the receipts," she said. I laughed, pinned it to my jacket, and followed her out the door. Evan tried one last time to control the narrative. He invited Lark to a rooftop restaurant and proposed a truce, implying that if she married him, the scandal would settle. The comment line above the invitation was almost amused. "He wants a wedding to reset the news cycle." Lark forwarded me the message and wrote, "Let's end him properly." We filed a formal complaint, requested an investigation into his procurement practices, and published a public letter signed by vendors he had stiffed. When Evan's office called to negotiate, our lawyer said, "No negotiation, only restitution." The climax arrived at the Winter Lantern Gala, the event my parents used to announce mergers, marriages, and charitable illusions. They invited press and politicians and enough cameras to make reality feel optional. Lark and I attended as honored guests, which meant they hoped we would sit quietly and prove they were still in control. My mother wore diamonds that looked like frozen tears. My father smiled as if his face had been bolted on. Evan stood near the stage, waiting for the moment he could look generous. In my vision, the comment lines moved fast. Stay calm. Wait for the live mic. Let them open their own trap. When the host announced a special message about unity, my father stepped up. He began a speech about family and forgiveness, about moving forward together. The room relaxed, pleased with its own sentimentality. Then Lark stood. She didn't ask permission. She walked to the second microphone and said, "Before we talk about unity, we should talk about the money we stole to fund this stage." My mother's smile collapsed. My father's eyes flashed. He reached for her arm, but she stepped away. I opened my phone and went live. The chat count surged. The comment line steadied into something almost serene. This is it. We projected documents onto the ballroom screen using the venue's own system, because Lark had access to the technician booth and the technician owed her favors not built on fear. Invoices appeared, transfer records, an email thread where Maris joked about washing donations. The crowd murmured, then hissed, then went silent as evidence stacked. My father attempted to speak, but the host's mic cut out. Our technician friend had flipped the switch. Evan tried to leave, but journalists blocked him with questions. A politician stepped away from my mother as if scandal were contagious. Lark named the vendors who hadn't been paid and announced a repayment schedule funded by her trust portion, not because she was noble, but because she refused to let victims wait for court timelines. My throat tightened with a feeling I hadn't expected: relief. After the gala, the family's empire didn't vanish overnight. It fractured, restructured, sold pieces to survive. My parents tried to salvage their image by calling us confused and misled. It didn't stick because the public had documents, and documents are stubborn. Investigations began. Auditors arrived. A judge froze accounts. Evan's company lost its contract and discovered humility, which looked like silence. The comment lines grew quieter. Sometimes they still appeared, but more like weather updates than commands. One afternoon, Lark showed me a hidden server closet in the mansion rows of equipment humming like trapped insects. "This is what my father funded," she said. "A private opinion engine. It scraped comment feeds and predicted reactions. It generated advice for our PR team. It probably latched onto your live stream and started talking back." She watched my face. "So, your audience was software." I stared at the blinking lights and felt a strange tenderness for my earlier fear. Even if the lines had been artificial, the choices they pushed me toward were still mine. I said, "Then we can unplug it." Lark nodded. "Already did. Twice. It keeps rebooting." I grinned. "Then we keep pulling the plug until the habit sticks." We didn't end with a tearful family hug. We ended with boundaries and paperwork, which is a more realistic kind of mercy. I kept Rowan as my working name, because I liked the way it sounded on my tongue. Lark dropped the family surname in public, while keeping it in court until every contract was clean. We formed a small holding company that invested in boring, necessary things: logistics, co-ops, worker-run accounting services, legal aid for vendors. We hired Juno full-time and gave her equity. We built a repayment fund that sent money to drivers before headlines faded. The last time the comment lines appeared, I was walking past the same cafe where my mother had cried and my father had shaken my hand. The grinder was loud. The tables were still sticky. A single line flickered in my vision, faint and brief. "You didn't beg." Then it vanished.